Sabu, a legacy etched in pain, and a tragic final chapter. On May 11, 2025, the wrestling world lost one of its most unique and brutal icons, Michael Brunk, better known as Sabu. At 60 years old, the man who had long defied death with every fall from a ladder or dive through barbed wire finally succumbed. Not in the ring, but likely as a result of the very toll that ring had taken on him. Though official details of his cause of death remain undisclosed, those familiar with his lifestyle and history understand that his end was shaped by decades of unrelenting physical punishment, chronic pain, and a life lived on the razor's edge. The birth of a violent vision. Sabu was born into wrestling royalty. His uncle was the infamous Ed Farhat, known as the Sheik, one of the most feared and violent performers in wrestling's earlier eras. Trained by his uncle in the unforgiving traditions of hardcore brawling, Sabu inherited not only his mentor's brutality but also his mystique. From the beginning, he was different. In a world filled with characters and storylines, Sabu often remained silent, letting his actions speak. And what those actions said was terrifying. Wrestling fans first took serious notice of Sabu during his early 1990s run in Japan's Frontier Martial Arts Wrestling, FMW, and later in Extreme Championship Wrestling, ECW, in the United States. There, he redefined what it meant to be a hardcore wrestler. Tables weren't just props, they were launching pads for his aerial assaults. Chairs weren't just weapons, they were foundations for springboard attacks. His matches frequently ended in blood, both his and his opponents'. For Sabu, pain wasn't a consequence, it was a language. A body built on scars. Sabu's style was not performative, it was self-destructive. He saw physical boundaries as challenges to be erased. In one of his most infamous moments, Sabu tore his bicep open on barbed wire during a match. Instead of ending the bout or seeking help, he had the gash taped shut with athletic tape and finished the match. Later, he received over 100 stitches. That act, almost mythological in wrestling circles, came to define his ethos. These were not isolated moments. Sabu's entire body bore the record of his career. Broken ribs, a shattered jaw, a fractured neck, countless concussions, dislocated joints, and more. In ECW, where insurance and long-term care were almost non-existent, wrestlers had to keep going or be left behind. Sabu kept going. But every leap came with a cost, and the interest eventually came due. Lifestyle of the damned. To sustain this level of punishment, many hardcore wrestlers, Sabu included, turned to painkillers and other substances. While Sabu has been relatively private about the extent of his addictions, insiders and fellow wrestlers have long spoken of his reliance on pharmaceuticals to mask the pain. This wasn't a choice born of weakness, but of survival. He was performing 5 to 6 nights a week, often in brutal conditions, without rest or medical attention. The locker room culture of the 1990s discouraged vulnerability. Admitting pain could mean losing a spot. Sabu also lived a largely nomadic and isolated life. Unlike other wrestlers who cultivated large fan followings with social media and personal appearances, Sabu remained distant. His persona as the silent assassin was not just an act, it was who he was. He rarely spoke in interviews, refused to break character, and often kept to himself backstage. Many admired his dedication, others worried it hid deeper struggles. The cost of immortality. Although Sabu's hardcore style made him a legend, it also cost him broader mainstream success. He had short runs in WWE and TNA, but his refusal to adapt his wild, unscripted approach made him a misfit in tightly controlled promotions. His in-ring work was too unpredictable, his body too unreliable, and his style too dangerous for corporate television. Even so, his cult following only grew stronger. Throughout the 2000s and 2010s, Sabu continued wrestling in smaller promotions around the world. But fans began to notice a difference. His movements were slower, his injuries more visible, and his reliance on pain management more apparent. In 2021, he suffered a serious health scare and began using a cane due to hip degeneration. He was no longer the death-defying maniac of ECW, he was a man paying for every fall, every gash, every scream. His final days. In the weeks leading up to his death, Sabu made several public appearances, including what would be his final match in April 2025 against Joey Janela during WrestleMania weekend. The match was billed as a celebration of his legacy, but those who saw it described it as painful to watch. His body, battered beyond repair, could barely keep up. But in true Sabu fashion, he pushed through. Less than a week before his death, he appeared at the Tri-State Wrestling Alliance reunion in Philadelphia, one of the last strongholds of his ECW roots. Fans, many of whom had grown up watching him leap through flaming tables, waited in line for autographs and shared stories. Some noticed how frail he looked, how distant. That appearance would be his farewell. When news of his death broke, the wrestling world responded with shock and sorrow. WWE, AEW, and dozens of independent promotions paid tribute. Former opponents and allies shared memories of a man whose devotion to his craft was both inspiring and tragic. Wrestlers like Rob Van Dam, who shared both the ECW stage and a long friendship with Sabu, posted emotional tributes, calling him a real one until the end. What really killed Sabu? The official cause of Sabu's death has not yet been confirmed. But based on his long and well-documented health battles, especially chronic pain, hip and spine degeneration, and past struggles with substance abuse, it's tragically plausible that his lifestyle finally overwhelmed his body. Whether it was organ failure, an overdose, or cumulative health breakdown, the truth is clear. Wrestling didn't kill Sabu in a single moment. It killed him slowly, over decades. In many ways, Sabu lived as though he were already dead. His relationship with pain, risk, and mortality was not like most people's. He walked the edge so often and so long that it became home. And in that sense, his death was not a surprise. It was an inevitability. The hardcore saint. Sabu may never have headlined WrestleMania. He may not be inducted into every Hall of Fame. But his impact on wrestling is undeniable. He was one of the few who truly changed how the sport was seen and felt. Without Sabu, there is no ECW as we remember it. There is no hardcore revolution. There is no Jon Moxley, no deathmatch resurgence, no new generation of daredevils. He was the bridge between the wild spectacle of 1970s brawlers and the high-risk athleticism of modern performers. And like all bridges, he was walked on, beaten down, and ultimately fell apart. Conclusion: a beautiful kind of pain. Sabu gave everything to wrestling, his voice, his body, and eventually his life. He never wanted to be safe, and he never wanted to be ordinary. He wanted to be remembered. And he will be. Rest in peace, Sabu. You truly were homicidal, suicidal, genocidal, and death-defying, until death finally caught up.